The Browns, they're putrid. They're the worst team in the NFL.
The season, the 2024 season is over.
Lamar Jackson can't win the playoffs. He'll win a third MVP, though, so that's great. Drew Sample is the most important piece of the Bengals offense next year.
Go Joe Burrow. He deserves to be MVP. I wish he was the Browns quarterback. Kind of mean that.
If you're looking for the most reactionary, silly, and unserious show on the internet, then you're home. Live from Hamilton, Ohio, it's Off the Bench by Chatterbox Sports on 1410 ESPN Radio.
And just like that, and then there were two.
That's right. Grip it and rip it.
This
Kinner and Tissot.
I was going to say we should have just broke out the old imaging right there. I mean, good stuff. But happy Friday. Friday is here. We're heading into the weekend. A lot to get into. This is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. But yeah, we've cut the cast in half. Elliott has been let go.
Dropping like flies.
Yeah. And then there was, I'm ruining Off the Bench. There was a lot of demands. Like if Kinner's here, I'm out. So, now there's going to be a revolution. I'm pretty sure like Everett and Mouse Cop and all them, they're going to go follow them to their show. And, my bad. No.
Look, it started with Reed, and you're just cutting us all off one by one by one. It's one a month. You're getting us out of here. It's crazy.
Oh, man. But happy Friday again, Off the Bench. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissot with you here. Shout out to Elliott. Much needed time off. He's going where it's warm. Kudos to him. He's going to go vacation and hang out where it's warm. I'm jealous of that. Casey, of course, he's not. He may be off the show today, but he's not off. He's out working as hard as
he's somewhere warm too. The Miami Natatorium. It might be the hottest building in this state right now. That thing, when the pool's in there and the chlorine and the heat, there's nowhere hotter than the Natatorium. So shout out to Casey. He's fighting the good fight in there. Oh,
you could feel it as you were talking.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the smell of chlorine. But nonetheless, we welcome you guys in. I hope everyone has had a good week to this point. We got a lot to get into. Look, there's been a lot of repeated storylines throughout this week, and rightfully so. There's just a big fallout from the Ohio State-Michigan game. We do have another Urban Meyer story today that we'll get into around the corner. In fact, there was so much noise about the possibility of Urban Meyer returning to Ohio State to coach that he actually had to put a statement out. So we'll get to that coming up here in a bit. We do have headlines here that we're about to jump into. Also, a college football recruiting story that I want to get into later in the show. But Jacob, are you familiar with Tyler Lockhart?
I saw that he flipped and flipped and flipped back, but I didn't really see a whole storyline about why.
So this isn't uncommon where players flip, they commit and then they decommit, then they go elsewhere and then they decommit later. Like we know this, but this is one of probably the ugliest recruiting stories I've heard that involves parents. So we'll get to that later on in the show as well. Our conference championship game predictions plus our week 14. Is that where we're at? Our week 14 NFL picks.
It's flying by.
The Bengals. Time flies when you're not in the playoff hunt. I don't know, but
right.
Bengals on Monday Night Football. They got the Dallas Cowboys, the Simpsons game. We'll get to all that coming up here around the corner. But you know what? This isn't Elliott's headlines, but we'll go ahead and put a little music behind it. We'll jump into some headlines. Some of the biggest stories. Yeah, some of the biggest stories in sports that we wish we could spend more time on, but they're not going to take up a full segment, of course. But how about this? I know this was tweeted out on Chatterbox Sports yesterday, or 2 days. Yesterday, Jake, that this is good news for Bearcats fans, I believe, on the football front. Quarterback Brendan Sorsby, and I like the way this is worded. This wasn't people.chatterbox worded it this way, and whoever the admin was. No, it was just retweeted from ESPN's Pete Thamel. Quarterback Brendan Sorsby for the Bearcats apparently has agreed to a new deal to return to Cincinnati for the 2025 season.
Look, good for UC. Good for UC. At the start of this year, Brendan Sorsby was playing so well that we were buying or selling whether or not he was going to move up and transfer out of Cincinnati and go to, I don't want to get UC fans on me again. I almost said go to a legitimate contender, but I shouldn't say that. But good for UC to get him back. He's one of the most exciting players that UC football has had outside of that Desmond Ridder window. I mean, he's a big name. He's a guy that everyone in this city respects, that UC fans think can get them over the hump and out of the hole that they're in right now. And certainly it looked like they were going to at the start of the year. And I just reading a tweet like that, there's nothing I can look at other than agreed to a new deal. I don't care who the school or who the player is. The wording of that in college sports is just insane to me. I can't believe it every step of the way how far we've come, how much this sport has changed, for better and for worse. But it's stuff like that that reminds you, man, these guys just aren't amateurs anymore. This is free agency. This is a version of minor league professional sports. I I don't know what's going on, man. It's crazy to see a tweet like that, especially from Pete Thamel. Usually tweets like that are from collectives or from NIL donors, or we gave this guy X amount of money to commit to our school. But that from ESPN, he sat down and negotiated a new deal. Just crazy, the change in college football.
Yeah, and, again, the Cincinnati Bearcats doing a better job at keeping their good players than the Cincinnati Bengals. So whoever worked out that deal for Sorsby needs to get on the phone with T. Higgins, needs to get that deal done with Jamar Chase and take care of Trey Hendrickson and, take care of some of them there. But we'll get into the Bengals coming up here in a little bit as well. No, the Sorsby quarterbacks, by the way, is he a junior? Is he going to be a junior?
He's going to be a junior.
Is he going to be okay. So there's a lot of – we're going to probably start talking about this more throughout college football moving forward. What we will call bridge quarterbacks, like we talk about that in the NFL. Jameis Winston is a potential bridge quarterback in Cleveland until they figure out what they're doing with their quarterback. Bridge quarterbacks existing in the NFL. I think we're going to see that in college. We're already seeing it, but I think we'll start labeling it that here pretty soon. You look at what Notre Dame's done the last couple of years. You look what Will Howard is at Ohio State. Sorsby fits that mold because we're seeing a lot of teams that are trying to balance, okay, do we go after the top quarterbacks in the recruiting class? Yeah. But we bring them in. We can't start them right away unless they're like obviously, you have to be super good, like a Trevor Lawrence or a Justin Fields, or technically he didn't start that first year. Yeah. Bottom line is you have to let those guys sit a year to kind of develop a little bit, but you also can't throw them to the wolves and not go get a bridge quarterback. The Sorsbys of the world are going to be those guys that those bigger schools target. I'm glad that Cincinnati, and by the way, the way he was trending to start the season when they were 5-2,
sure.
He's fallen off. That might be a good thing for Satterfield and Cincinnati because you get your star quarterback back. The uncertainty when you lose your quarterback derails a lot of momentum. The Bearcats at least have that. You know who your quarterback is heading into next year, and I think that's a big plus for the Bearcats when it's all said and done.
One thing I think that's super interesting, and you bring it up there with the bridge quarterbacks, how many 3-year starters are we going to see after, I guess, Quinn Ewers? That just doesn't exist anymore in college football. There's no way that you're going to get a 5-star athlete, or especially quarterback, with how the money's being thrown around these days, to come sit at your school for a year or maybe even 2 while you have older guys play. They're going to get out of there. They're going to go start somewhere else and then maybe transfer their way back in. Who knows how this is all going to work? But other than, a super outlier scenario in Arch Manning where his family has been very committed to development and staying at Texas and eventually starting when it's his turn and all that stuff, I think any other 5-star quarterback in the situation with Quinn Ewers would either be starting over him or have transferred by now. So it's going to be really weird to see how all these schools operate. I think the Will Howard model is going to be what it is, a 1-year. I don't want to call him a mid-level transfer. I think he was one of the better quarterbacks in the portal, but a 1-year bridge quarterback to get you until that superstar freshman is ready to go. You give him 2 years of starting, and then you probably do another bridge quarterback because you can't have a 5-star sit there for 2 years. They're going to leave. They're going to go somewhere else. And I think that's the concern a lot of these schools are in right now. And I think that's the conversation a lot of us were having in the chat yesterday, talking about Michigan and Bryce Underwood, about whether or not he's going to start as a true freshman with all the money that they gave him. I would expect them to go get a bridge quarterback because that's a 17-year-old kid. You're investing a lot in him. He's going to, you think if you're giving him that money that he's going to be really, really special. So I would expect that to be another example that we see this offseason of a school going to get a 1-year starter out of the portal.
Well, which is one reason, too. You talked about Michigan. They made all that big news about going out to get that top quarterback prospect. They were getting to flip from LSU to go there. That's been the big headline. You would think that, hey, he's going to Michigan. Man, he's going to help them win right away. No, Michigan in that same week also in the mix to potentially land USC transfer quarterback in Miller Moss. So that's another example of that. Now, is Miller Moss, is he a junior? What is he?
That is a great question. I know he was draft eligible. He was draft eligible, so that means he had to have been a junior. It's just whether he was redshirt or not. Yeah, just a true junior. So a year of eligibility left, maybe 2, depending on if he can get a redshirt clearance or not.
And that's something for those players to evaluate too. If Iowa needs you. If Iowa needs you, you'll go be the man for 2 years at Iowa, but at Michigan, you're probably only going into a 1-year situation. So who knows? All right. Next up. So we just talked about how the Bearcats, they know who their quarterback is going to be next season. They might know who their coach is going to be next season, but North Carolina, the Tar Heels, I don't know who their quarterback is going to be next year, but we know that they're going to have a different head coach next year. That new head coach could potentially be Bill Belichick. We knew Bill Belichick was going to coach again in 2025, or at least was going to pursue opportunities. I didn't think it would be at the college ranks, and I definitely did not think it was going to be a school like North Carolina, it came out yesterday that North Carolina has interviewed quite a few candidates to fill their head coaching vacancy. One of those interviews happened to be with one of the best resumes in the history of the NFL coaching-wise, and Bill Belichick. Bill Belichick to North Carolina, how serious was this interview on either side?
Yeah, I originally didn't think so, but Paul Feinbaum was on ESPN this morning saying that it's a legitimate possibility with real interest from both sides. So maybe it is real. I wasn't fully convinced that Bill Belichick was going to go all in on coaching in the NFL next year, much less going back to college. I thought there was a 0% chance he was going to be a college coach, but with the way the college is shifting and schools hiring GMs and stuff like that, maybe the closest role he can get to what he had in New England was in college. The Patriot way now in college, with guys buying into a culture and hiring your staff, and you're the GM and the coach. You control all the roster moves. You go get whoever you want out of the portal. You get 17, 18-year-old kids that say, holy cow, that's Bill Belichick. I'll do whatever Bill Belichick asks me to do. I don't think that happens in the NFL anymore, and that's part of why I haven't loved the idea of him in Cincinnati. I think with the guaranteed money and the contract size and all that stuff, the Patriot way and buying in and all this stuff that's so crucial to Bill Belichick's success, I don't know that that's modern-day NFL. I do think he could swing it in college, maybe. So as I originally saw it, I thought, yeah, that's a crazy idea for him to go to North Carolina. But if they give him GM control and roster control and basically the same ability to pull the strings that he had in New England, it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, yesterday I was adamantly against it. I thought it was ridiculous. I thought it sounded silly. Never thought of it from that perspective, though. You're right. One thing that the reason people keep saying, including yourself, it won't work in the NFL, it's just the NFL has changed. The athletes, the money has gotten so big, the egos have gotten so big that his ego and their egos don't mesh. Tom Brady is one of the best quarterbacks of all time, arguably the best of all time. What made him also special was the fact that he didn't clash with his head coach. It ultimately led to him leaving after 20 years. So at the end of the day, it's one of those, like, you're not going to get that opportunity again in the NFL, most likely, if you're Bill Belichick. From a control standpoint, you're right. College, I guess, gives you all of that. And his son coaches at Washington, right?
Yep.
Wasn't his son on the coaching staff
Defensive
at Washington?
coordinator at Washington.
So we know who his DC is going to be most likely right off the bat. So I don't know. I guess I did not think there was a high percentage chance of this happening, but you might have slightly convinced me. I didn't hear the Paul Feinbaum clip on it. So that's,
I still think it's a low chance. It has to be, right? Because he's going to ask for so much more in terms of money and control than any other coach North Carolina is going to interview, I would guess. So, but it would be an all-in move for a program in a vulnerable ACC. So we'll see.
Look, we've seen legendary college coaches go fail in the NFL. Don't really see legendary or just very good. I mean, good NFL coaches go to college, let alone legendary coaches from the NFL go to college. And that's where we're at right now. That would be a very unique transition if that ends up being the case. But nonetheless, moving on again, if you're just joining us, we welcome you again off the bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett. No, we did not get rid of Casey and Elliot, but Casey's working another job right now. And then, of course, Elliot is enjoying some time off over the weekend. We appreciate him and look forward to having him back next week. But I did not chase anyone else off. I mean, my gosh, they're not viewers by any means. Let's go. Eric Bieniemy fired by UCLA as their offensive coordinator. And I knew this was going to be news because, I mean, we don't need to get into the underlying issues that, of course, led to why he was such a big talking point years ago. But I think we get into this, like, we look at Andy Reid's success as a head coach, and we know that the success in Kansas City, it's Andy Reid's offense. You know, he's the one calling the plays, and people just couldn't grasp, how could Eric Bieniemy not be getting a job? Well, it was that. He did not have very good interview skills. He rubbed a lot of players the wrong way. There was a lot of reasons why you could justify him not getting a job in the NFL, but there was just always so much other noise that put him at the forefront of a lot of conversations. So then he leaves the NFL. He doesn't renew. He doesn't get brought back, of course, by the Washington Commanders. Goes to college, OC for UCLA. Forgot that was even the case. Didn't even think about Eric Bieniemy this year until his name popped up as being fired. Then his agent comes out and says, well, hold on, he wasn't fired. They mutually parted ways. Again, trying to save face because he's trying to return to the NFL. He already has a weird resume to begin with, and now you want to go back to the NFL after being fired from college. So I get why they want to save face in that situation. I know we're making it a story, part of headlines today. I just don't. I think this is a non-story. I don't know really my opinion of him. I don't think he's responsible for the Kansas City Chiefs' success. He left. He didn't even realize it. So I don't know. I don't know what to make of it. I get why people are talking about it, but I don't think he's a difference maker. At least he hasn't proven that to be the case yet.
No, and I agree. And it's the same take I had when people were talking about him as a head coach. I don't think you should go hire an offensive coordinator that's not the play caller. I can't credit them with that offense. I think that was a similar issue I had at the time when we went and hired Zach Taylor. He was the quarterback's coach in LA. Yep. He didn't call an offense. And obviously now we've seen that, at least in my opinion, he calls a pretty dang good offense. But, to go hire an offensive coordinator just off of the success of their side of the ball when they aren't even calling plays, that always kind of was confusing to me and didn't make a whole lot of sense. And to see him go to Washington and really struggle, and then go to UCLA and really struggle, I think that kind of spells the end for Eric Bieniemy. If I had to guess, he goes back to Kansas City. I don't know why he wouldn't. I'm sure they'd take him as a quarterback's coach or a tight ends coach or a quality control analyst or whatever other title they can find for him. If Eric Bieniemy wants to keep coaching the NFL and no one wants to give him play calling duties, I would imagine that he can slide his way back in with Kansas City. And I don't know if it's tongue in cheek, making fun of Matt Nagy for his failure in Chicago a while ago, but I have seen people throwing his name out there as a potential head coaching candidate in this cycle with the success of Kansas City as their new offensive coordinator, and I think this is a perfect warning sign for people that are looking at that. I don't know if you can be, rehabilitated in Kansas City because you're not given control of the offense. Matt Nagy's not calling the plays. It's still Andy Reid. So for everyone that's looking at Kansas City and those coaches for a lot of success down the line in higher roles, I think Eric Bieniemy might be a warning sign for all of that as we move forward in the NFL.
Now, Jake, you had some headlines as well to jump into.
Yeah. The two interesting ones. I'm an SEC guy, went to Alabama and SEC championship this weekend. Big game. Texas and Georgia going to determine seeding in the playoff, and College Game Day's there. That's always fun. And guest picker Timothy Chalamet in Atlanta for the SEC championship. What's the connection to Georgia or Texas or the SEC or football? I don't get it. It's my biggest pet peeve when College Game Day goes to these great cities, these great games with these great teams with long histories, and they give us nothing that has any connection to either of the teams. It's my biggest gripe is when they go to Ohio State with long list of alumni, and our two most famous fans didn't even go to Ohio State. It's Bryce Harper and LeBron James. There's a lot of football players that went to Ohio State and did pretty well down the line. Game Day never uses them. And now you have Georgia and Texas, phenomenal alumni bases. And they go with the Lisan Al-Gaib, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, Timothy Chalamet. Just a preposterous choice, if you ask me, Kenner.
Yeah, the LeBron James thing. LeBron James did not even play at Ohio State, didn't play in college, of course. But, hey, his son picked the Buckeyes. Oh, nope. He also didn't pick Ohio State. Well,
we got another
Bryce
chance.
Will.
We got another chance.
Yeah, we'll see. But yeah, the guest picker thing, always interesting. I mean, I'd rather watch someone more entertaining than that. Even if you're going to pick someone with no tie-in, go that route.
Do the comedian route. I think that's usually the best way they go if they do the no tie-in. Whenever they get, they had now I'm blanking on his name, but they had a comedian as the guest picker for Alabama, Texas 2 years ago, and it was Nate Bargatze, and it was a fun time. It was no connection to either school, but he was at least entertaining. I don't know what Mr. Chalamet really brings to the table on a College Game Day. How much does he know about the teams he's picking? First off, I think that's a good question off the rip. But the other thing I wanted to talk about, and I think it's probably the biggest conversation point on at least national shows today, Dan Campbell's decision to go for that fourth down at the end of Thursday Night Football last night. I think it's certainly interesting. A lot of people think it was unnecessary, just Dan Campbell being aggressive to be aggressive and not really having a reason to do it. But looking at winning percentages, going for that fourth down versus kicking the field goal changed their winning percentage about 20%. According to analytics, at least, that aggression was absolutely warranted, and it locked up the game. They went from 76 to 94% winning percentage after going for that fourth down. So, at least in my opinion, I think that play fit their culture. And maybe the other 31 coaches, I get upset about it. It doesn't make sense. But Dan Campbell tells those guys in the locker room what he's going to do in situations like that week in and week out. So when you send the kicker out there, when your whole team knows that you're usually going for it and they get the 4th and 1 and they say, okay, we're ready to go. We're going to go for this and we're going to ice this game. And then Dan Campbell says, not this time. I think that has a huge negative effect when you're used to that level of aggression from your coach. My biggest thing with Brandon Staley when he was the Chargers head coach was the inconsistency on aggression. I think that's the most dangerous thing in the world. I think if you're incredibly aggressive and you do it all the time, that's fine. I think if you're soft and you kick field goals all the time, I think that's better than not knowing which way you're going to go. At least Dan Campbell's consistent, and I'm sure he's really glad it worked, because if he wouldn't have, he would have been getting killed this morning. But it's another game where they're eating kneecaps, and the Lions get the win. I'm going to have to respect him at some point. I was on Dialed In yesterday, and I put him as my third team on the power rankings. I'm gonna have to put him at 1 at some point. I don't know when, but it's happening.
Well, that's just one of those decisions that, people are like, man, that was such a gutsy move.
Yeah.
Good Dan Campbell, he's awesome. He's this. Well, you're a kick wide. If he gets stopped and stuffed at the line of scrimmage, Dan Campbell's now a bad coach.
Jared
Goff
that's why I don't fell
like
down. Like, it almost didn't work.
They showed a one clip where his knee is technically on the ground as he's getting it off. I know that doesn't necessarily mean you're down in the NFL, but if he was touched from behind at any point, he could have been. But if that happens and he's down, are we still praising the aggressiveness of Dan Campbell? No, we're saying he's a fool, like we did last year when he kept going for it over and over in that Dallas Cowboys loss that, really could have derailed their season when it was all said and done. But nonetheless, I say all that to say I would love him as my coach in Cleveland. I think he'd love him.
I would love him.
He would fit in Cleveland very, very. It fit in a lot of places.
If last night in that post-game press conference told me anything, when we fire, if we fire, whenever Zach Taylor is done in Cincinnati, I want a head coach only. I want a Dan Campbell. I want a rah-rah guy. We get coordinators to call the plays. Give me a guy that's just going to be a leader of men. I think that's the recipe for success in the NFL these days.
Well, last night's Thursday night football game, the Lions over the Packers. In the post game last night, Richard Sherman had some interesting things to say, not about the Packers or the Lions, but about Bengals quarterback Joe Burrow. We have that coming up for you around the corner, plus another Joe Burrow story that involves Rob Gronkowski, who he wanted to be his tight end. He reached out to him. He got ghosted. What the heck happened? We'll have all of that when we come back. Again, this is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers, Justin Kinner and Jacob Tissett with you here on a Friday. We'll be right back.
Statistically, look, Joe Burrow should be the MVP. His team has just let him down. He's got 30 touchdowns, 5 interceptions. You can say what you want. You can boo what you want. The numbers are the numbers. I don't give a dang what y'all say. The numbers are the numbers.
Jared Goff.
They're homers. I'm not a homer. I'm objectively speaking.
The last non-quarterback to win MVP, Adrian Peterson.
Statistically, look, Joe Burrow should be the MVP. His team.
He's saying what we've been thinking.
Yeah, and look, and this is about Burrow. We'll get to Burrow in a second. But for me, last night, I see why the fans with the Lions are booing. I don't think it's because they were homers. I'll actually go out on the limb here and say, even though he has the third highest odds to win MVP, I still never hear about his name gets brought up in no shows. Maybe in Detroit a lot. Jared Goff might be grossly so disrespected when it comes to this award.
Yeah.
I know what you're gonna. I think I know what you're gonna. Yeah, I played this game yesterday, and I threw you under the bus for no damn reason. But no, like it's one of those where I know Saquon Barkley. If you have two quarterbacks who just aren't having super MVP years, like last year, I don't think Lamar should have won it last year. If there was ever a year to give it to a running back, Christian McCaffrey should have came away with it last year. Christian McCaffrey has a big regret to win it last year than maybe Saquon this year, just because there are some really good seasons happening right now, quarterback wise. If it is that quarterback award, Jared Goff should be the MVP favorite at this point, especially after last night, especially the fact that they came out, they were able to knock out the Green Bay Packers. They're the second best team arguably in the NFC right now. Maybe they're the best team. I don't know, but they are winning arguably. They're at the top of the toughest division in football at this point in the NFC. At the end of the day, Jared Goff, he's third in total yards. He's third in total yards in the NFL. He's second in completion percentage. He's top 5 in touchdown. He's a top 6 quarterback when you look across the board, when you average out all the metrics. I just don't get it. I think the name is scaring people off, just like Baker Mayfield's name would scare people off. Like last year, we were willing to give Lamar Jackson's numbers were so bleh last year, but we gave it to him because the name. And Patrick Mahomes was the favorite for the majority of this year for a while to win it, and his numbers are horrible, but we were willing to put him there because of the name. I think that right now, if the Lions and Bengals had switched and Joe Burrow's numbers were exactly mirrored of what Jared Goff is, Joe Burrow's the favorite to win MVP this year. Jared Goff should be the favorite to win MVP if it has to go to a quarterback. I love what Josh Allen's doing in Buffalo. I always love the do more with less guys. That's Josh Allen right now. I really appreciate what he's doing. I was waiting to see what kind of quarterback he was going to turn into if you take a Stephon Diggs away and he doesn't have as many weapons. He's actually gotten better. So kudos to him. I have no problem if he wins MVP, but I truly believe Jared Goff, because of his name, he's not a superstar name. That's why he won't win MVP, but I like him way more than Josh Allen this season. I love Josh Allen, but I'm telling you, Jared Goff should be the favorite to win MVP at this point, along with Saquon Barkley at the top.
I think I am still team Josh Allen, but you are absolutely right in terms of how Jared Goff's underrated and overlooked. Whenever I talk about the Lions and justify having them below the Eagles in the NFC or below the Chiefs and the Bills in terms of Super Bowl contenders or anywhere really in the rankings, the thing I point to is they don't have the quarterback that these other teams have. Maybe they do. Maybe they do have an elite top 10 quarterback in the league. Jared Goff is playing awesome football right now. And the other thing that a lot of people don't talk about with the Lions is we've seen him play terrible and them still win games. I don't think the other teams in this Super Bowl contender area have that wiggle room. The Bills, if Josh Allen somehow has an off night, they don't have a chance to win that game. Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, obviously we've seen them overcome it because of Spagnuolo and that defense, but that's why they're back-to-back Super Bowl champions. I think the Lions have that kind of wiggle room, being able to win games in so many different ways. Last night was the game they were supposed to lose. With 4 reserve D linemen and Aleem McNeil leaves early in the game, none of their preseason starting D linemen were in the game. And they still were able to get the win against a really good Packers team and a quarterback in Jordan Love that I always put above Jared Goff in terms of talking about guys that I trust to make a run late in the season. I'm going to have to change how I look at Jared Goff because he really is a good quarterback. I don't want to say elite yet, but maybe I should. I don't know why I'm not other than the name, because all the numbers point to it. The wins and losses point to it. He's now done it in LA and he's done it in Detroit. It's incredible what he's done with his career as the number 1 overall pick, getting traded like he has. I can't imagine many number 1 overall picks have had that much success after being traded. Usually once you move off those guys, they're donezo, more or less. Obviously Baker now, but that's his 4th team since then. A straight trade from the team that drafted you to a new team, and to have immediate success like Goff has is just phenomenal.
Yeah, and like we shouldn't be like, we've seen Goff put up a season like this. He was in 2019 when he was with the Rams. I think he was like 2nd or 3rd in total yards passing that season, which total yards passing isn't everything, but it shows you he could he could move the ball up and down the field. He completed 70% of his passes that year, had, about, I think, in the mid-20s touchdown-wise and whatever. He was right there at the top, and the Rams went to the Super Bowl that year and ultimately lost to the Patriots, of course. But to watch him do that, the other reason I'm a big fan of Jared Goff is because I think you can't have an average to bad quarterback if you have a head coach as what some would deem reckless as Dan Campbell. I love Dan Campbell's aggressiveness, but if you have an average quarterback and you have a reckless head coach, and reckless has a negative connotation to it, but I do think like that decision last night, a little reckless. You leave a win on the table. You're in the midst, you're at the top of the division. All right, right now. You lose that game, Minnesota's creeping up behind you. You end up not winning the division, getting home field. It's because it was very similar to the conversation last year with the Lions and Dallas at that point. You can't have a coach that's as reckless as Dan Campbell and aggressive as him with the average quarterback and it work. It's working because you have such an elite level quarterback in Jared Goff right now. It just sounds weird. It sounds weird when I say elite level quarterback, but that's Goff. And if he doesn't win MVP this year, he'll never win it because there's nothing he could do. The best team, one of the best records in football, division leader, top 3 in every major statistical category out there, and still the 3rd or 4th best odds to win MVP. And he's not even in the discussion amongst all national and local shows out, outside of this right now in Detroit probably. But very good game last night, very good result there. But we opened up the segment with that clip from Richard Sherman. Again, highlighting the fact that, hey, you guys could talk about Jared Goff, you could talk about Josh Allen, you could talk. you look at the statistical season that Joe Burrow is having right now, that dude right there would be the clear-cut MVP if his team hadn't let him down and lost so many games. And that's what got a lot of Bengals fans' attention last night when he made that comment in the postgame.
3,300 yards for Burrow, 30 touchdowns, just 5 interceptions, third in the league in QBR at a 74.1. He just won Player of the Month in a month where the Bengals didn't win a game, throwing for 1,000 yards, over 20 touchdowns, and just 1 pick. It's unbelievable what he's been able to do this season. And we always point to the defense, and we say the way he's able to put up all these points, play next to perfect football, and keep the Bengals in these games. Though they do keep losing them, he's keeping the Bengals in these games, having fight, giving the city 110% of everything he has. And that's something that deserves to be applauded. But I think something that we gloss over with the Bengals this season that gives Joe Burrow even more credit to what he's been able to do is, what is he working with offensively that has made this so easy to put up these numbers? Jamar Chase has been great. Move him to the side. Best receiver in football this year, chasing a triple crown. Unbelievable. T. Higgins has missed a lot of time, and we have seen no one else in that wide receiver room take a step up. We've even seen Jamar Chase take a step back in a lot of those games without T. Higgins. You lose Zach Moss, who coming into the season was supposed to be your running back 1. Chase Brown was supposed to be the change of pace back. Love Chase Brown. He's been great for us. There have only been 2 non-Chase Brown carries since Zach Moss got hurt. That's not a sustainable backfield. Joe Burrow does not have a great run game. We have a rookie right tackle who has been awesome, and there's a lot to build on, but he's still a rookie, and he still makes mistakes. We have the worst guard duo in football. Ted Karras has played well, but we have the worst guard duo in football, and Orlando Brown has missed time as well at left tackle. This offense, putting up these numbers, leading the league in every stat with this level of help, I think it's being overlooked somehow, what Joe Burrow is doing. I think this season has made Joe Burrow borderline underrated for what he's been able to do this year and statistically put up with the Bengals not getting wins. And I know wins and losses is what matters at the end of the day. And that's what you come back to. And that's why he can't win MVP with these great numbers, a historical season. And he's not going to be able to win MVP because the rest of the team in the front office and the coaching staff let him down. And that's such a shame. And that's what we talked about last night. We could potentially be wasting the best season of our franchise quarterback. There's a very small list of players that have put up multiple seasons of what Joe Burrow is pacing right now. And all of those guys are Hall of Famers or going to be Hall of Famers. And Bengals fans are just kind of sitting here and saying, okay, well, he's doing awesome this year. It's a lost season. He's going to turn around next year and just do it again. And this is our quarterback for the rest of this contract. And maybe it is. Maybe Joe Burrow is one of these generational quarterbacks. I certainly think he is. I certainly think he can string together multiple seasons like this. But what if he can't? What if this prime window of him being the best quarterback in football is only a year or 2 long, and now you've mashed it with the worst defense in the league? You are wasting potentially your best chance at winning with a historical wide receiver season, a historical edge rush season, and a historical quarterback season, and you're going to get nothing out of it. And that's the shame for Burrow, because could he end his career never winning an MVP after having multiple MVP seasons? Maybe. And that would be such a shame to be looking at in 5 to 7 years or whatever, whenever his time in Cincinnati comes to an end.
At the risk of, I don't want to make the chat mad, and we've been in heated debates in the past, so I'm going to put out the disclaimer that this is not, we don't need to get into a heated debate on this, but let me push back just a little. I think many fans outside of Cincinnati would disagree with you when you say that he has had no help. I think there's a lot of deficiencies on that offense. But when we say take Jamar Chase off to the side, the amount of targets and the amount that he's involved in the offense, and T. Higgins has played in 7 of the 12 games. 5 he has missed, no doubt about it. But and then we've also seen guys like Gesicki. Gesicki is non-existent in this offense right now, but when T has been out for whatever reason, I don't know how you can't balance his numbers when T is out there. But Gesicki, from a statistical standpoint, absorbs some of that when T is out. So I bring this up because I think he has a lot of help in that regards. We did a segment not too long ago where it was like, hey, are they too T and Jamar centric? Because you look at the amount of targets that those two get compared to everybody else. Joe's not even looking at those dudes. And I bring up Josh Allen, who, I don't think Josh Allen or Buffalo Bills fans are going to listen to that and say, well, yeah, poor Joe Burrow. He just doesn't have any help.
And that's not what I'm asking for. Yeah.
And offensive line's made up. I say all this to say I'm not discrediting the success that Joe Burrow has had this season, because what I'm about to say is going to sound like I am, but I'm not. Joe Burrow has had to put up the numbers he has had this year because the run game stinks and the defense stinks and they're trailing in games. So he's thrown more passes in the NFL this year than anybody else. If we had a guy that led a team in led the league in scoring in the NBA, and he also took so many more shots than everybody else, we would say it's a high volume. He's a high volume shooter, and that's why. But Joe Burrow, it's much different than basketball. Basketball, you're taking a lot of shots. You're taking a lot of bad shots. Joe Burrow has to pass the ball for this team to be successful. Okay, he has to take a lot. He has to have a lot of passing. So he's throwing the ball more than anybody else, which gives him the opportunity to throw for more yards than everybody else, which benefits Jamar Chase because he's getting more looks and all this. If the Bengals were in closer, and now they're in close games, but if they're in control of games, if they trusted their defense, Joe Burrow's not throwing as much. His yards and everything else is not as inflated as what it is. I don't think Jamar's having as dominant a statistical season than what he's having right now. It sounds like I'm discrediting them. I'm not. I think that a lot of those numbers are inflated, and I think if they were actually – people think that, man, look at those numbers. Imagine how good they would be with those numbers if they had a defense. I don't think those numbers would be as good as they are if they had a defense. I think those numbers are as good as they are because he has to keep going out there. He has to keep throwing. I say all of that to say, of course, he's the best quarterback in the NFL the way he's been playing this season. It looks like it is sad that he has had no help from the defense and just a lot of mistakes made from the coaching staff. Bottom line is do I expect him to repeat these numbers next year? Hopefully he doesn't, because that means he has a better defense. They have a better run game. They're milking the clock a lot. The defense is out there longer. So you may think I'm trying to discredit it. I'm just giving a little pushback, bringing the other side to the equation when it comes to this.
I do absolutely think you're right. I think, and I wasn't asking necessarily for like sympathy from Bills fans or anything for the Bengals not having help. I know what Jamar Chase is. I just think a lot of people look at the Bengals offense and say, Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, of course he's putting up these numbers. And that's just not the case. Like there are a lot of deficiencies on this offense that he has to get through. I think this year is the closest he's ever looked in the NFL to LSU Joe Burrow, in terms of what he's doing off platform and playmaking himself and doing it off script. And this is what Bengals fans have wanted to see, and not 4-8, but we've wanted to see Joe work a little bit more off script, I think, and not take sacks. And when he does hold on to the ball, to be able to run, to throw. And he's doing that this year, the best that he's ever done in his career. And it's incredible. But you are absolutely right. I think if the Bengals are going to win a Super Bowl, Joe Burrow can't be having a statistically top 10 quarterback season of all time. You have to have a run game. You have to have a defense that can control the game, and you have to be able to drain the clock. The reason why the Bengals offense is the best in the league passing statistically, and Kinner just said it, it's because Joe Burrow's thrown the ball 20 times more than anyone else. Granted, he has more completions than anyone else, and he's top 10 in completion percentage as well. So he's doing it at a high level regardless of the volume, but he is throwing the ball so much. And that's just a borderline impossible task to ask your quarterback to do week in and week out. I mean, we threw the ball 50 times a game for about a 3-game stretch. That's insane. You have to establish a run game. You have to be more balanced on offense. And I think that the Bengals really got hurt by the Zach Moss injury. Not that the run game was great before then, but the plan they had for the backfield fell through their fingers when he got hurt. And I just don't think Khalil Herbert has shown them what they wanted to see out of him after that trade.
Well, we'll see Joe Burrow on Monday night. He'll be on the road. Monday Night Football, Dallas Cowboys. Dallas Cowboys, that's such a great matchup. It's going to be a horrible matchup. And I expect Joe Burrow to put up big numbers. And I mean, what's the line, by the way? Are the Bengals favored?
They are.
They should be.
They are. It was 5.5 yesterday. It is down to 5. So Bengals -5. I believe it opened at 6.
Okay. Which is weird that it went backwards, only because I heard the Cowboys lost their top offensive lineman.
Yeah.
But we've seen Cooper Rush put up big numbers against this defense when it was slightly better in the past. So who knows what he could potentially do Monday night. I think these teams are actually kind of similar. I think Dallas has a better defense, but I think they're pretty similar when you look at the fact that they have well-known stars on the outside at wide receiver. Both teams struggling to really run the football. Dak would make this almost more of a mirrored image of one another, to be honest, if he was out there. But Cooper Rush he has the capability to put up big numbers. Let's just put it that way.
Now.
There's some bad
Bengals fans now.
Yeah.
He's done it against us before.
But Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett, this is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wingham and Dayton. So see, I blame Casey and Elliot for why I get so mad. And I thought about this the other day.
But you always get mad
Elliot.
at me.
Well, because hold on, here's the thing. This is what you two do. You guys are the tag team champions. Elliot knows what he's doing. Elliot says things that'll like get me all like scooting up in my seat. So then I'll make a comment because I'm pissed at him. But in the meantime, you caught the stray.
That's true.
So then now we're going at one another.
That's true.
And then go look at every argument we've had. Guess who's smiling?
Yeah,
it's Elliot.
You're right.
You're right. He's the instigator.
The best is the 3 box when you're remote, because we are yelling at each other on the boxes and he's just sitting there.
Just grinning, cheesing away.
Oh, it's
Elliot, hope you're having a good trip. Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. Let's stay in Cincinnati. We'll talk about the Cincinnati Reds when we come back. Look, we've talked all week about the possibilities of how the Reds can be significantly better next year just by improving the roster. But the more I hear Terry Francona talk, the more I think that if they didn't make one more additional move the rest of this offseason, I think the addition to Terry Francona is probably an addition of 5 to 10 more wins just in the way he knows ball, just the way he knows baseball, just the way his strategy, everything. I could listen to him talk baseball for hours. And luckily, we got a chance to listen to him on the Reds Hot Stove program earlier in the week, and we pulled a couple audio pieces from that just caught our attention, and we'd love to get your guys' thoughts as well. So we'll have Terry Francona sound bites from the Reds Hot Stove show when we come back. More Off the Bench next.
back in action.
Oh, my bad. I don't know why I was waiting for music. Was I supposed to wait for music?
There's no music
Fumble!
all day.
Man, that's my ADD in full force. So you know what? Hold up. Just for the recording purposes, 1 second. Oh, look at that flexibility right there. Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers. My bad, Jake. My bad.
All good.
Justin Kinner, Jacob with you here. Elliot off for the weekend. He went to warmer weather, but he'll be back with us early next week. Shout out to Casey. He's off the show today, but not off work. He's working hard elsewhere. Looking forward to getting everyone back on Monday. But we still have a lot to get into here on this Friday. Let's talk a little Cincinnati Reds.
I did everything I could to get everything in here. Didn't have access to the music.
I mean, but no, and this is working out just fine. We're getting everything in that we need to, and plus we didn't have to go into the office. That's a win. We're winning here today on this Friday.
That's right.
Look, we spent a lot of time this week talking about the fact that there was a report that the Reds might reunite with Jesse Winker. What does he bring to the table? Can he improve this team? Then there was the talk about, Garrett Crochet, the star lefty for the White Sox. The Reds are in on potentially adding him. It's between the Reds and the Cubs. I'm not sure where momentum sits with that move right now or not, but they're in. And we talked so much about, the Nick Martinez deal and the Brady Singer deal. There's a lot that they have to do to improve this roster. But we as fans right away, we've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years. We've only worked together since July, months, talking about how much of an impact does a manager truly make. I think the majority of managers, I'm not saying they don't make an impact, but I don't think there's a lot of managers that can. I think the impact that some managers can make is lose you games. A good manager in today's baseball is you don't even know he's there. I think I think David Bell, we started to realize he was there, and that became a little bit of a problem because it was just all the negative stuff, the lineups and the decision making late in games and the 1-run losses. Like we started recognizing David Bell was there, and I think that's an interesting thing. But there are very few managers who I think you can hire, and they literally make a ginormous impact in the entire organization, not just from a win-loss standpoint, but it'll trickle into that. I can listen to Terry Francona talk baseball for hours. I just still cannot believe that the Reds were able to do that. We kept talking about the possibility of the Reds moving on from David Bell all summer, and then they did it. And then we'd bring up Terry Francona, and I could tell that you would scoot back in your chair like, I'm not even gonna get my hopes up.
Yeah.
Okay? That's what I felt like you were too.
That's exactly what I was doing.
But the Reds land him, and it was just a completely different. We had Marty Brenneman on to talk about the possibility of getting Terry Francona, and he said that would be the ultimate home run hire. Little did we know, he already knew. He was already working his magic. When Marty was on with us a month ago when the hire happened, he was already spinning his web. Marty was already introducing the two sides. He was already getting that deal done. That's what was wild. But Terry Francona is the manager, and there's a completely different vibe with the Cincinnati Reds team. I truly feel like this team is just already 5 to 10 games better just by him being the manager. Now, some people think that's crazy, but then, Jake, you hear him talk. Just the other night, he was on the Reds Hot Stove League show, and he talked about a lot of different things. For one, his philosophy on how to use pitching, his philosophy on the base paths, his philosophy on fundamentals. I mean, everything across the board. I could listen to him talk baseball for hours. So we have a couple of clips we want to share with you. We're going to start with this one right here because right off the bat, everything that people were upset about with David Bell, the fundamentals. This team was so bad defensively. L.A. De La Cruz, we brought up the errors that he committed, right? And that's what people wanted to talk about the most with him, even though Jake's he dives into the advanced analytics to show us one of the best shortstop seasons ever, right? But we get so, even including me, not passing it to everyone else, I get so caught up on the errors. Fundamentals, that's what people want to see this team improve on the most. Here's what Terry Francona had to say the other night when it comes to his philosophy and their approach when it comes to the fundamentals with spring training coming up around the corner.
We'll do some things that are maybe a little different than other teams. Like you'll see the first couple weeks of spring training when our middle infielders come out of a game, like fifth inning. Okay, they're hot. Freddie Benavidez will go back to the complex with them, and we'll work them out for 20 minutes, half hour while they're hot. Because how many times do you really get it where they can go full speed? Right. You see them take their grounders in the morning, and that's all good, but it's not full speed. This is a way where we can do it full speed without beating them up, and we'll do a lot of things like that. We're going to run the bases. Like you will not see very often when one of our regulars gets their last at bat, we will not pinch run for them because I want them to understand that when they leave the batter's box, the game is just starting. And
you said that earlier, and I love that.
But then
quote.
when you pinch run for them, you're kind of telling them, well, you're not really living up to what you're saying. I want them to care about running the bases, and because it's important. That's how we can maybe catch up to some of these teams.
Now, some people, Jake, might be a little confused by that because you want him to care about running the bases. This team led the league in stolen bases last year, but obviously being smart is key. One thing I've never thought about from that perspective is even us as fans, the at-bat, the second that the ball leaves the bat, we think the at-bat is done, and it's not. Right. Because if you're on base, your presence still exists out there. If you get walked, and that's the point he was trying to make, is the second that you're on base, it doesn't mean your at-bat is done. Your job's not done. That was one of the coolest ways to phrase that. I hadn't heard that type of thing. I'm not saying that doesn't exist in baseball, but I've never heard it framed like that. Again, just these little things. I just feel so much more confident. I feel like we are in the best hands possible leading this franchise at this point.
I was the guy that sat here all summer and was saying, why do you fire David Bell? There's no talent on this team. I don't think there's a lot of managers that could get more wins on this team. The coach speak in the press conferences. That's how every coach is. Why would we fire David Bell? It's so clearly not his fault. Terry Francona has been the manager of this team for 2 months? A month and a half? Every press conference couldn't be more different from what David Bell was putting out there. It is so clear every time I hear Terry Francona talk, that's why you fire David Bell. That's why you move on, because you can get a guy like that. And maybe when the season comes around, we're going to end up, 82-80, and it's not going to matter. But right now, sitting here in December, I'm going to choose to believe that it does matter because I think we got one of the few managers in the game that does move the needle. And I know I'm the guy that sat here and argued that managers don't matter to win and loss, but when you get a great one, it does. There's always outliers, and Terry Francona is the definition of an outlier. The Reds with a young, exciting team, a good core of guys with great metrics and everything that you just have to clean up exactly what he said, the fundamentals. And they're going to do it. He's going to get them right, and he's going to clean everything up. And I can point to as many advanced metrics as I want that tell you Ellie's a great shortstop. If he leads the league in errors, there's always going to be people detracting from him. Imagine how great he'll be if my advanced metrics already tell you he's one of the best shortstop in baseball, and he cuts down on the errors. He'd be the best shortstop of all time. So there we go, Tito. He's doing the right things. He's saying the right things. He's getting Reds fans excited to go. And all the terminology, like you said as you led into that clip, he just knows ball. Every time he talks about baseball, it just seems like he loves it. He lives it. He breathes it. The first quote that he said when he came here is that he didn't want to retire from baseball. And even managing, he wants to move into the front office or something along those lines afterwards, whether it's here in Cincinnati or elsewhere. Terry Francona loves baseball, and that is so clear to see every single time he's in an interview or talking about the Reds or talking to anyone else, and that's so nice to see at the helm. No more coach speak and no more the David Bell nonsense. We have a guy that's a true leader and going to get these guys to buy in.
I'm not meaning to bring up politics again, but just bear with me. No, my biggest gripe throughout, and this isn't a Democrat or Republican thing, this is just election time. I think that debates they're pointless. I have no clue. I don't think I've ever tuned into a debate and been swayed to the other side or thought, oh, that's a good point by the other side or vice versa, whatever your side is, that's fine. Even the side that I lean towards, I don't think brought up a lot of great points either. It's just that's the reality of these debates, and they're out on the campaign trail and they're telling you what they're going to do, but they're not really telling you what they're going to do. They'll just say vague comments of, we're going to make the economy better. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. But they don't really give you any substance of, okay, well, how? Because every candidate, Democrat, Republican, independent, whatever, every candidate is going to tell you what they're going to do. Well, we're going to make groceries cheaper. We're going to, improve the economy. We're going to do that. We're going to make your gas cheaper. I have a question. How? So you look at Terry Francona, who comes in and says, hey, we're going to, we're going to improve this team fundamentally. We're going to make this team better. Oh, wow. Did you hear that, Jacob? Do you hear Terry say they're going to make him better? Thank God, because David Bell, he said he wasn't going to make him better. No, there's some things he says that all managers say. But then he lets stuff not slip, but he goes into detail in these interviews and he gives you a little behind the scenes, behind the curtain look. And it's like one of the points he brought up is, hey, after spring training games, they're not done. They're already loosened. They're warmed up. They're hot. So Freddie Benavidez is going to take them back to the facility and they're going to continue to work out, get an additional half hour in just so they could focus more on, okay, it's sometimes hard to get into live game, shape or speed or whatever. And now you're already loosened up. Go continue the workout after the game. The game's not done. Yeah. Spring, you get on base. He's not going to pinch hit for you because you're one of the main guys and doesn't want to avoid you getting hurt. He wants you to continue playing out the at-bat, playing out your role out on the field. Then he also brought up this. We want to be better pitching. Well, how are you going to do that? Well, here's a great clip coming up. He brought this up about one thing that you can look for at spring training coming up. Spring training, a lot of times I don't know what the purpose of spring training is because you hide your best players the entire time because you don't want them to get hurt. And then you end up using April as your spring training. And you want to so bad in April every damn year. Take a listen to this. Francona, Derek Johnson, this is their plan for how they're going to attack getting the pitchers ready for the upcoming 2025 season. Take a listen.
But the goal is to get them out close to 100, and I'll tell you what, to hear the pitching coach say that, I was thrilled because a lot of times you hear them, they're trying to kind of baby them, and we've all seen the game is kind of morphed into, somebody goes 5 and they're looking to come out. We want those kids to learn how to stay out there. We don't want to abuse them, but we want them to try to get through that third time through the order. These kids got a chance to be good. You look at Hunter Green and Lodolo. They're got a chance. So we want to help them along.
Interesting thing about that, it was cut off a little bit about the beginning, but it was the approach to Derek Johnson had pitched the idea to Terry Francona that he wants all the pitchers to reach 100 pitches throughout spring training so that their arms are fully ready to go come April. or technically late March. Isn't that weird? Opening day, March 27th.
Yeah,
I mean, they're going to have a whole
bizarre.
series played by April. Very wild. But no, like Jacob, like again, I brought up the politician thing, not to talk politics, but it's like we get those vague comments. We're going to make gas cheaper. We're going to make, this better. We're going to improve the economy. But they never go into detail of how they're going to do it. We hear managers say this all the time. We're going to focus on the fundamentals. We're going to work hard. We're going to do, but they never tell you, okay, what is that? That's vague comments. What are they going to do? Terry Francona has already told us just in this brief couple clips already of not just what they're going to do to get better, but how they're going to do it to get better. And this is why, again, 5 to 10 game improvement automatically just with him leading this ball club before we even talk about what players they still need to add moving forward.
A coach coming in with a plan is so refreshing. That's all you want when you hire a new coach, because they've watched from the outside and seen what's gone wrong, in this case with the Cincinnati Reds for the last 30 plus years. And they have to have ideas of how to change it, or they wouldn't have taken the job, especially in Tito's case. He's retired. He's sitting at home. He's a Hall of Famer. He's not taking this job if he doesn't think, A, they can win relatively soon, and B, his plan is going to work to fix it. I like that he's laying it out in public for the fans, letting them know what's going on. And this specifically, getting to 100 pitches and stretching these guys out in spring training, I think is one of the best things that I've heard him say all offseason. Because what's the main concern with some of the guys in our rotation? I know Lodolo is more injuries, but in Andrew Abbott's case specifically, he seems to hit a wall late in the season every single year where he's putting up borderline all-star numbers. We're debating him as the long-term 3 of this rotation, blah, 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 blah. And then it hits the late season and he falls off a cliff and he's borderline unusable and that arm turns into absolute rubber. Maybe this spring training ramp up is going to be what combats that and gets these guys ready for a longer season and the ability to throw more pitches. And I really like Terry Francona noticing that as a major concern for the Reds this season and being willing to attack it during the offseason and having a plan to do so, not just saying we need guys to go longer in games and be more consistent in their starts. Every manager says that. He's telling you how he's going to get there and how he's going to get it done. And it's great to see. It really is. This is, after all we've been through in Cincinnati, managers in baseball, coaches in football, this is such a drastic change from every single one of them, at least in my lifetime. I mean, Dusty Baker's great, but I know at least most of this fan base didn't like him a whole lot at the end. So to have a manager and a coach that everyone is behind, at least for a little bit, depending on how this first season goes, that's great. A great feeling in Cincinnati. And it's not one we've had a lot, especially in the last 20 or so years.
All right, last clip here on the way out. Again, Francona not just, talks about how they're going to try to improve fundamentally throughout spring training, the philosophy on how they're going to improve the pitching throughout spring training, but also gives his philosophical thoughts regarding the use of the bullpen, third time through the order. He weighs in on a couple things here I find very interesting. Take a listen.
We're there to win. I do think as pitchers, like you might give them some leash early on to prove whether maybe they deserve the right to go through the third time. Right. Also saying that there's times when a kid's pitched a good game and if I don't think he has enough left to get through the inning, I'll just take him out. Because what I don't want him to do is maybe go 6 good innings, have a walk and a bloop, and all of a sudden he's on the hook for the loss if he didn't have a legitimate chance to get through that next inning.
You got to save your bullpen, right?
Well,
is that part of the fine line? He's shaking his head.
Yes.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, I have a bullpen card that is probably my most important piece of paper because if you abuse that bullpen, they have no chance of being good, and that derails your season.
My biggest takeaway from that, and there was more context to that conversation as well with Francona on the Reds Hot Stove the other night, they asked him about the third time through the order. One of the other things that he kind of went into detail on is we got to stop taking these principles, rules, and abiding by them so tight. Yeah. Like, third time through the order, we got to get him out. What I heard there is we know statistically that guys struggle third time through the order. He's saying it's going to be a case-by-case basis. Perfect. It's going to be one of those, if he feels he can make it through the third time through the order, he'll leave him out there. If he feels like, man, I don't know, I don't want to rock the confidence of this kid or potentially, end up putting him in a position where he's going to walk about it and him be responsible for the loss. Oh, I don't know. Maybe that's called managing the game, not having a manual that says, third time through the order, the book says we got to take him out.
Yeah.
Well, how do you think his arm looks, Coach? How do you think he feels? I don't know. The manual says I have to take him out now. That's what baseball has become. And that's why I'm so aggressively against all that stuff, because it's one thing to have a cheat sheet and it's another thing to just live and die by it. When you have a baseball mind like Terry Francona, he's going to use that information to make the best decisions possible while also using the knowledge and feel in his gut when it comes to baseball. That was my other big key takeaway from that as well.
Yeah, analytics are such a huge part of baseball, as they are in really every sport now. You see it in football, which was really the last sport to go analytically. Now they're popping up percentages of whether or not you should go for fourth downs in NFL games. Analytics are in every single sport, and every single coach uses them, whether you like it or not. And the debate is always just how much you should use them and how much you should live like they are law. And I think that's the biggest thing, and that's why you see the great coaches use them to their advantage, because analytics tell you things that help you win games. That's the truth. This is knowledge that coaches haven't had in the past, and it can absolutely result in wins. But it's also important for your coach to look at your team and your situation with your unique players and say, okay, analytics tell me to do this, but I know my guys. I know this roster. I know this team, and we're going to go the other way because that's what's best for this group. And that's what sets Terry Francona apart from David Bell. David Bell seemingly looked at a list and he said, all right, the iPad tells you to go here, you're going there. I don't think Terry Francona is going to do that. And I didn't necessarily have a problem with that from David Bell. I think unless you are a Terry Francona level manager, falling back on analytics probably isn't the worst thing. There's something to justify every move. There's other people, quote unquote, smarter than you telling you that it's the right thing to do. But when you're Terry Francona, you've been around baseball as long as you can, as long as he's been. I mean, I promise you analytics didn't have him coming back from down 3 games. So he's probably throwing analytics out the window long time ago in his time in Boston, and hopefully he still uses it to benefit the game, but he has to be malleable to how his team plays the game. And I think the Reds play it in a very unique way. The speed, the focus on the pitching, and all that stuff. This is a unique core and a unique skill set on a lot of these star players. So I hope we got a manager who's able to maximize all that. I saw Fred M in our chat as we're playing these clips. He's ready to run through a brick wall, it seems like. He says he's going to go get a Terry Francona jersey before the start of the season. Well, Fred, you're late to the party, pal. You're late to the party, pal. I ordered this sucker a long time ago. Terry Francona wore number 10 when he played in Cincinnati. Had to get one for the season. He's going to turn things around in Cincinnati. I couldn't be more excited for him to be our manager.
You just happen to have that just sitting there?
I went and grabbed it during the clip when the full screen was on.
I was like, that's pretty cool. I mean, that was just so like, damn, he had it ready to go and fired up.
Benefits of doing it at home.
The bottom line is baseball has shifted to the point to where managers are not rah-rah guys, and they're not like the old school. Terry Francona is rah-rah. He's old school. He's everything I love in a manager, and I just can't believe the Reds have him. I just don't. And this sounds, it's maybe a loser mentality. He hasn't done anything yet, but it's so refreshing to hear things and just kind of get a feel for his philosophy and approach and bring that to Cincinnati. I'm pretty excited about that when it's all said and done. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett with you here. This is Off the Bench, 1410 ESPN Radio in Dayton, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube. Urban Meyer released a statement yesterday to try to hush some of the noise when it comes to the future of Ryan Day as the Buckeyes head coach. Do you believe him? Do you believe Urban Meyer when he came out and said what he said yesterday? We'll get to that coming up around the corner. More Off the Bench when we come back. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett with you here. This is Off the Bench presented by United Dairy Farmers, Chatterbox Sports on YouTube, ESPN 1410 Wing AM in Dayton. We just heard a lot from Terry Francona on the Reds Hot Stove program from earlier in the week, and just wanted to spend some time on that. I know we spent some time on the possibility of the reports of potentially reuniting with Jesse Winker, and then of course all the talk of the possibility of landing in the ace from the White Sox in Garrett Crochet if they were able to pull that off. But the bottom line is, whether they pull these moves off or not, I just think right off the bat Francona is a 5 to 10 game improvement just from his mind and philosophy and just approach to the game itself. One thing I see your friends with David Shaw, by the way. I saw you got the David Shaw last night. Shout out to Shaw. He drove. So Champions Grill is where?
On the west side, on Work Road, over on the west side.
So he drove from Dayton to go all the way. Yeah, Kenner won't even make that drive to go support the show, but Shaw makes the drive out there. But
he's committed, man. We had a lot of the chat there last night. It was fun to see everybody. Nate Seltzer made it on down. I got to sit and talk to Shaw for about 2 hours after. We were just talking about ball. It was fun. It was a good time. So make sure you guys make it out to Champions before the season's over. It's always fun to put faces to names in the chat. We love meeting you guys. We really appreciate the support and everything like that. So it's always nice to see you guys come out to the live show.
So one thing I saw that he put in the chat was, when it comes to the Cincinnati Reds, is that he has to see the man. He needs the management to prove it before anything. And my only pushback on all of that stuff is right now the offseason's not done, but from the time the season ended to now, what grade would you give the front office? I guess. I don't think they've done a bad job. I don't to this point.
What would you have rather them do?
Yeah.
Is there anything? Right. I don't think there's anything that could have happened so far in the offseason that I think they've done wrong. They got Martinez on the qualifying offer, which we can argue whether or not $20 million for a swing starter is worth it for the Reds, but that's a winning team move. The Dodgers, the Yankees, they're not letting a guy like that leave. They're signing him. That's a winning team move. Going to get Francona, winning team move. No doubt about it. Top manager on the market, Hall of Famer, cultural change. Trading Jonathan India for a starting pitcher, in my opinion, a double plus move. I've been asking them to trade him for a long time. I think Matt McLain's the future at second base. We have the infield set up. If they continue on this trajectory, how could it be any less than an A+? And the players that they're connected to on December 6th, that's really the most you can ask for, is to be in the conversations with the Garrett Crochets, the Teoscar Hernandez, the Michael Confortos. Be linked to those guys. Be talking to their agents. Be talking to these players. That's all we want, is to be in the mix. And the Reds have put themselves squarely in the mix of this offseason, and it's refreshing for fans, because usually we sit here and we can go through the moves we want them to make, and we can cross off the top 10 to 15 and say they're not going to do it. I don't think we can do that this year. I think everything's on the table. I think the front office has already shown me enough that they are changing how they're operating, at least a degree. And I don't know if that's going to mean a $250 million payroll, but it's certainly going to be a little bit more than we've seen. And if the counting number in the payroll doesn't necessarily show that, I still think that they're going to be more committed to this team and to winning now than they have been really at any point since the 2012 ride.
Yeah, and that's why I brought I saw his comment in there, and I just wanted to highlight that, because at the same time, when you say, well, I need to see it first from the ownership and from the front office, but you need to see what is it that you're looking like? What is, they need to do this for me to be impressed. And the reason I ask that is because if you're asking them to do what the Dodgers and other teams are doing, then they will never be successful in your eyes as far as that goes. But right now you went and got the best manager in baseball. You knew you needed to add more depth to that rotation. They wasted no time in doing that, moving on from Jonathan India, take advantage of his experience, former rookie of the year, and go get an experienced pitcher to put in that rotation. You continue to go down the list. The fact that they are even, and we thought that maybe there's a chance after that Nick Martinez deal that they could have been done. And then here we are on the same week. They're looking to add Jesse Winker. We're hoping that that's not the extent of it. But then also in the mix to get a Garrett Crochet, again, the ace from the White Sox, another lefty on top of that, that puts up sick numbers as well. You want veteran pitchers pitchers in this rotation. Especially when you hear Francona's approach of, hey, I want pitchers throwing 100 innings in spring training. You can't do that when you have all second and third year guys. You have to have guys who know what they're doing, and I think that's why Singer and possibly Crochet and others are so crucial to the approach from Terry Francona. So when ownership and front office, when they hear that approach from Francona, they got to give them the correct ingredients to go cook. Now, they haven't got Crochet yet. I get that. But, man, I don't know. I feel like the fact that they're even one of the finalists to get him is the fact that they're willing to do whatever they need to potentially land him. So I get the hesitation. They haven't earned everyone's trust yet. But, I mean, it's only been 2 months, it's been a month of the offseason, 2 months since they've hired Terry Francona, and they have made all the right moves considering the limitations when you think about the fact that the TV deal kind of fell through the way it did. So I'm not against the ownership in front office. I'm going to give them some leash here. I think they're doing a pretty good job, all things considered.
I agree. Obviously, you want to see more, and with the way the history of this franchise has gone, it's difficult to buy all the way in that they're going to try and win. But I'm certainly going to choose to believe, at least in December, because that's the only way to have fun as a sports fan, is to drag yourself along before the impending pain and sadness, which we all know is coming, just hopefully a little later this season than normal. David Shaw was actually telling us a stat at Champions last night that the Reds are something like 35 games below 500 at the All-Star break combined over the last decade or something along those lines. I probably butchered that stat, David. If you have it in the chat, you can help us out. But just unbelievable that more often than not, the season has been over by the All-Star break for the Cincinnati Reds, at least in my lifetime. And that's such a painful place to be. Hopefully, at least, Terry Francona can drag this along into the offseason or into the playoffs. And then we're not talking offseason during the World Series and the Championship Series and all that stuff, because we were given offseason grades in the middle of October. And that's a painful place to be as a baseball fan.
I said we're weird, dude. I get why other fans make fun of us. I get it. But no, that stat he threw out there, that's called a bathroom stat. That's called you're in the bathroom and you're scrolling and then, oh, look at that. That's called a bathroom stat.
You're absolutely right.
All right, Urban Meyer. All week, there was Jay Crawford. He used to be, actually, when you think of the show First Take back in the day, Dana Jacobs and Jay Crawford, actually, they were the Molly Curum of First Take back in the day when it was Skip and Stephen A. Smith. But Jay Crawford, a Cleveland native, and he works for some media company out of Cleveland. I can't remember what it was, but he came out and said that sources close to him that are tied to the inner circle of Urban Meyer have come out and said that Urban Meyer is definitely interested and he's willing to come out of retirement to coach, and he's definitely interested in the possibility of reuniting with the Ohio State Buckeyes. That had everybody talking all week. Every chat board out there was jumping all over it, including all the Ohio State chat boards. And, we started giving our opinions on it. I think, it makes sense, this, that, and the other. But Urban Meyer, and I think you have it, Jake, right? You have the graphic ready to fire. Urban Meyer released this statement yesterday. He released the statement yesterday, and I have it ready to go too, so it don't matter. But he released the statement yesterday. I had sent it. My bad. I had messaged it to you, but not a big deal. So he releases this statement yesterday. Urban Meyer says that it has come to my attention that there are reports speculating my return to the sidelines in Columbus. While I thoroughly enjoyed my 7 seasons as head coach at The Ohio State University, I have no interest in coaching again. I will always be a Buckeye and have full confidence in Ryan Day, his staff, and every player that has put on the scarlet and gray. This was the statement released by Urban Meyer yesterday as the noise started heating up that, man, Urban Meyer, he's willing to come out of retirement and he's interested in coaching the Buckeyes. Well, that's a problem because the Buckeyes job isn't open. And the Buckeyes, and he's a mentor to Ryan Day and you're going for his job. I don't know what to make of this statement. I think that he had to put that out, his closeness and ties to the Buckeyes, of course, and Ryan Day. He couldn't come across looking as if he was hunting his job and trying to, backstab him behind his back. Like, if you're going to backstab him, do it a little bit more quieter than that. Don't release information to Jay Crawford. I mean, come on. So as we sit here right now, I don't mind that statement, but I also don't necessarily believe it either. I have no interest in returning to coaching. Well, now, because the job you want's not open.
Right.
But when that job potentially comes open, if you lose a first-round game against Tennessee, well, now you might be interested. And then you can go back and people will say, well, Urban, that statement. Well, yeah, at that time things were different in my life and I just wasn't interested. Now he's interested. So excuse me if I don't really believe our guy Urban Meyer and mainly because I don't want to believe it. I want him. Yeah. If Ryan Day is let go, I want Urban Meyer to take back the Buckeye job, just to bring back that perception and that, just having that identity of toughness. I want that back. And I think Urban Meyer brings that. The good thing for Ryan Day, though, he has the playoff to prove that he's not the lame duck coach that everyone says he is at this point. Your thoughts on that statement? Do you believe him? I'm
going to choose not to. I'm in your boat. I'm in your camp right now. I'm going to choose not to. I think that we've seen Urban Meyer lie about being done and not interested in coaching before. So I think there's every bit of proof that Buckeye fans have a little bit to hold on to here that maybe he's not telling the truth. He said he's never going to coach again multiple times and came out of retirement. So maybe he does come back to Ohio State. But as you said there at the end, Ryan Day has every opportunity in front of himself right now to preserve his job. You don't fire a national championship head coach. You probably don't fire a Final Four head coach. He wins 2 playoff games. He's still in Columbus. He wins 1 playoff game. You're probably having a very legitimate conversation about him still being in Columbus. I know a lot of people have hung their hat on Urban Meyer being the obvious answer to replace him if Ohio State does move on from Day. I think that's probably unlikely whether Meyer wants to or not. I think that Ross Bjork is going to want to get a guy that's his. I think Ohio State as a whole right now would maybe benefit from moving off of the Urban Meyer era. And I would be excited about a 2 or 3 year Urban Meyer stretch. I think it'd be really, really fun. I think long-term Ohio State would benefit from, if they do fire Ryan Day, going a different route and starting over instead of going backwards. And I know Urban Meyer would probably result in a championship. But for long-term success, you are Ohio State. I think you go get a guy that you build this organization around. You go get one of the top coaches on the market. And the name I keep seeing thrown out, and Sir Boy Wonder puts it in the chat here first that I've seen, is Marcus Freeman. He's a Buckeye. He's had a couple bad losses at Notre Dame, but he's won some big games. He's gotten to 11-1 and leading them into the playoff now. You have to make him say no, I think, before Urban Meyer. There's a lot of guys out there that I think you have to make say no along with Urban Meyer, regardless of that statement. If Ryan Day is fired, he's certainly getting a call. But the name that I have circled, if they were to fire Ryan Day, the guy that I want to take over in Columbus is playing a play-in game for the playoff this weekend at Iowa State. His name is Matt Campbell. Matt Campbell is from Massillon. He coached at Bowling Green, Mount Union, and Toledo before he got to Iowa State. He's a Columbus guy. He's a Buckeye fan. He maximizes his talent at Iowa State. He gets them to winning seasons. This is their first 10-win season in program history. He has done everything that was been asked of him at Iowa State. He has been a top-tier coach on the market year after year, being linked to big jobs after big jobs. I don't think he wants to leave Iowa State. I don't think he's going to do it for a job much smaller than Ohio State. I don't think he'd say no to Columbus. So if Ryan Day's gone and Urban Meyer's officially a no, even if Urban Meyer's a yes, I think Matt Campbell is the name at the top of my list, at least personally.
So the reason I made the face about Matt Campbell is because Kev and I have had debates about him over the years. Kev's a big Matt Campbell guy. I'm one of those where I don't know. Matt Campbell, I get the Ohio connection, and that's been also brought up too. When you look at the coaches who have had success in the rivalry, they're all Ohio native-born coaches. And then you look at Urban, you look at Tressel, you look at Woody, you look at all of them. So I get, so that lives in the back of the minds of a lot of people, and that could have an impact there. But at the same time, it's like I always see Campbell's name popped up in every big. You already said it every time, like the Alabama job when he wasn't a favorite, but like that name, like, take a look at Matt Campbell, and I'm like, take a look at what. What has he done? Like, I get DeBoer at least led, Washington to, a lot of success, top 25 success, regularly in the playoff conversation, led him to a national championship game. I understood the DeBoer route, but the Matt Campbell thing I just could not get on board with. But you brought examples to the table of why you like him. I'm just bringing childish. I just don't like him to the table. So, whatever. Would that be the end of here's what I like about the Matt Campbell suggestion. And of course, going the route of Notre Dame's head coach at this point in Marcus Freeman is the stability. Yes. Urban Meyer doesn't bring stability. Urban Meyer would bring a Terry, like right now we're talking about the Reds and that Terry Francona 3 to 4 year window, hopefully longer, but we We know we at least get a short window at Terry Francona. That's what, and Francona's coming in to revamp the entire franchise. That's what Urban's job would be if he got the Ohio State job, to come in and let's clear house. Let's reset this. Let's reestablish the identity that this program had on his way out the last time. He also didn't like how he went out the last time. He was kind of chased out. He didn't have a good relationship with the school president at that time. Gene Smith was more in looking out for himself than Urban, and I understand that completely. Urban wants to probably go out more ceremonially than what he did. And I think that matters to him, and I think he would be interested in it. Would Ohio State be interested in him? Absolutely. But I think we talked, Jake, you said Ross Bjork wants his guy. At the end of the day, it's what, the donors who are willing to fork over the money.
Right.
Ohio State has the money to pay their own, but the donors are going to speak loudly on that as well. And I think he's an instant fix. I think Urban coming in, you tell Urban, 3-year window with the idea of, we also have to have a succession plan to the post-Urban Meyer era, but let's get everything back in order. Let's get the ship back on water, and let's go from there. By the way, we're saying this, Ohio State's still one of the favorites to win the national championship, but whatever. I don't know. I like the Marcus Freeman. A year ago, if you would have asked me Marcus Freeman, I probably would have said no.
10 weeks ago, after Northern Illinois, if I would have asked you Marcus Freeman, you would have said no.
But the reason I'm Marcus Freeman now is because they lost to Northern Illinois and the way they've responded since then. Because I thought they were about to have a tailspin of a season after losing that so early in the year. They've lost to Marshall in the past. They've lost bad games. But the fact that not only did they bounce back, but they look like one of the best. If they beat them like they're supposed to, we would have talked about that scenario where Notre Dame could be undefeated and sitting at the 5 spot because they don't have a conference conference championship. So this team's really good, actually. I think Notre Dame is actually way better than I think we anticipated coming into the year. But I would not mind Marcus Freeman. The stability standpoint, as we've talked about, I think would be huge. Marcus Freeman could be a long-term. He could be the Buckeye coach for a long, long time. If that's the case, he wouldn't have all the limitations, with enrollment limitations that you have at Notre Dame. Of course, you wouldn't have that at Ohio State. I think that there's a lot to be desired for if you are a fan of Marcus Freeman at this point. So who knows? I don't know if you caught this last thing on the college football front before we get to a couple NFL picks on the way out. Are you familiar with Tyler Lockhart?
I am not. I saw the story or the timeline of the flips, but I don't know much about the story.
So he's a 4-star linebacker that had originally committed to Ole Miss, then decommitted from Ole Miss, or technically never really committed to Ole Miss at all because of fudged up paperwork. So he ultimately ended up committing to a school he technically didn't want to play for, and that's obviously at this point Mississippi State. So this comes from Steve Robertson. He's a reporter now. He's a reporter that covers this situation. He says Tyler Lockhart and his mother officially signed with Mississippi State tonight. Tyler Lockhart and his mother signed with Mississippi State tonight. Steve says that I am told Ole Miss did not properly facilitate the signing paperwork. His mother never e-signed the documents. Ole Miss officials have been texting her all evening to sign the e-signed documents. She refused. Steve says, I am told that even though Ole Miss reported him as a signee, that they did not have the e-signed documents. Allegedly, they did not file him as a signee with the NCAA like the rest of the class. They kept pursuing the e-signature, and his mother would not provide it. She did provide one, however, to Mississippi State, so he is now officially a Mississippi State signee and has been listed as such with the NCAA. The reason that this has become such a gross story is because he's 17 years old technically at the time of this National Signing Day. So if you're 18, you could sign wherever you want. You don't need the parental documentation with it. Because he's 17, the parents have to sign off on where he goes. The mother did not want him to go to Ole Miss. He really wanted to go to Ole Miss. That's where he wanted to go. He did not want to go to Mississippi State. She signed the document. He didn't even get to decide where he wanted to go. She signed the document to send her son to Mississippi State. I don't know how you feel good about this if you are Mississippi State. It's such a weird scenario, but it's an ugly story. It's getting a lot of attention, not probably around here for obvious reasons, but this stuff could happen around here at some of the schools we follow. I just thought this is such a wild story that the mom does not want him to go to Ole Miss, so she is forcing him to go to the school that she wants and taking advantage of the fact that she holds that power because he's 17 years old.
Yeah, that's insane. Kids should have a way to go to the college that they want to go to. I don't know if that's a hot take or groundbreaking news here. I think if your kid's going to play college football, you should support him in his decision, not backdoor him to a different school. That's crazy to me. And that's not the only wild story from signing day. Four-star running back Usman Koromoa committed to Florida State or committed to Georgia, flipped to Florida State, flipped back to Georgia. And in his post-commitment press conference thing, he was quoted as saying, "I really wish I could have went to Florida State." You could have. You could have went there. Whose decision is it?
It's not a dream.
I understand that the money is such a big part of it at this point. I get it, and it is. But you have to play the game a little bit. You got to go where you're wanted. It's the same thing that happened with Underwood. Obviously, that's a little bit of a different conversation because of the money and the caliber of player, but he said time and time again in interviews after interviews after interviews, why would I choose Michigan? Why would I go to Michigan over LSU? And then they up the money. Boom. He's at Michigan.
But to be fair, that's the why.
I know. I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Right? Like but here's the same thing. So you say, when the athlete said, "I wish I could have gone to Florida State." Well, you could have. But here's the deal. If I'm the school that hears him say that, say, "Hey, we don't want you anymore then. Go." Because the transfer portal, these players can come and go as they want. Why invest any more time and effort into helping this kid develop early on as a freshman if he's already telling you he doesn't want to be there? If I'm Mississippi State, and by the way, the reason this is such a big deal over there in that neck of the woods is mainly because we talked about Ohio State and Michigan hating one another. Well, Ole Miss and Mississippi State also hate one another as well. So this was such a big deal to Mississippi State that they were able to get one of their top commitments to flip to them. But Mississippi State, they're almost using this kid as a pawn because they would rather stick it to Ole Miss by taking away one of the pieces that they wanted, even though they know he doesn't want to be there. And you're going to bring him in knowing that probably after a year, he's going to bounce and go to Ole Miss once he's 18 and has the ability to do so. So anyways, I thought that was an interesting story at the end of the day. There's so many of those gross stories that we hear all the time. Parents, I mean, that's wild. I mean, it's unfortunate too. Like the athlete, the kid has deserved, he has earned the right to go, take his talents, not the parents' talents. The parents don't own that talent. I mean, technically, I guess at 17 they might, but it's just insane to me. It's very unfortunate, but there you go. I thought that was a weird scenario nonetheless.
Yeah.
All right.
Very bizarre.
Week 14 of the NFL season is upon us. The Browns have the Steelers coming up on Sunday. The Bengals have Monday Night Football. They're going up against the Dallas Cowboys. We'll touch on a couple matchups as we give you a couple picks heading into the weekend. We'll close out off the bench when we come back. Justin Kinner, Jacob Tissett back with you here, 1410 ESPN Radio. Call me Ryan Day because my clock management skills were just atrocious. Like this might be probably, I've beyond enjoyed the show today, but this might be the worst. It's been a good one. It's been the worst time show. So we have to have 3 15-minute segments, right? 6 15-minute segments. Let's just do a little math here, okay?
This is inside baseball for the chat.
Yeah, Elliot, if you're watching, we need you today, dude. Segment 1 was 22 minutes. 7 minutes over. Segment 2 was 18 minutes, 3 minutes over. So now we're 10 minutes over. Yeah. And then we're 15 minutes over total when you look at segment 3, which was 20 minutes. That's an hour, straight hour. Sorry, advertisers. Yeah. But don't worry because we cleaned it up. Yeah. We cleaned it up last segment by remember, I was like, we'll just do a quick segment just to get us back on here. No, 22 minutes. 22 minutes.
Yeah, surely this one will be a short one.
Surely it will. I'm hoping. But the conference championship weekend coming up, I thought we'd be talking about the rematch between Ohio State and Oregon. Yeah. Obviously, that is not the case. But Penn State, Oregon in the Big Ten championship game, Texas and Georgia in the SEC championship. A lot of good conference championship matchups coming up. We pretty much know the playoff field. There's a couple teams that, based on certain scenarios, we might bump a team out. Alabama most likely in at this point, although some people deem that controversial. You have a couple 3-loss teams trying to fight to get in, and the only one with 2 top 10 wins. That's controversial, apparently, to put Alabama in. But that's where we're at. Just your thoughts heading into conference championship weekend.
Look, it's an interesting weekend. I mean, certainly you look up and down the list of conference championships, and most of these teams, at least in my life, aren't in these conferences. Texas is playing for the SEC championship. Oregon's playing for the Big Ten championship. SMU playing for the ACC championship. It's weird how much they've changed college football, and I didn't even talk about Arizona State in the Big 12. It's crazy how all of these teams are playing for new conferences, and these switches didn't seem to matter. You see first-year teams basically across the board in their new conferences competing for the championship, and I think that's really cool. But I also think this year, and the conference championships especially, have showed us a major problem in college football, and one that I don't think a lot of people were talking about before the season, and it's schedule discrepancy. It's been a huge problem in college football this season, and we're seeing it with the debates around the college football playoff. Look, it should be really easy. You should say a 10-2 team is over a 9-3 team. It should be very cut and dry. But in the current college football landscape, teams play such drastically different schedules that you can't just go win-loss. It's not applicable to which teams are better than others. It's just not. And that's the era we're in right now. And there's a lot of things you can do to fix that. You could go back to divisions where you have common opponents for everyone in the sport. You can shorten or lengthen the conference season, cut down on the non-conference games so you're circling more teams through different stadiums. There's a lot of ways to get through this. But when we're talking about the ACC championship, and SMU is going to play Clemson, and SMU didn't even play Miami or Clemson in the regular season, you're not even playing the other contenders in your conference in a lot of these situations. We've talked about Texas a lot as well. Texas's SEC schedule was a joke. They play Georgia, they play Oklahoma because it's the rivalry game. That's it until A&M at the end of the year. They're not rotating through the contenders that the rest of the SEC is rotating through. It's crazy how different a lot of these schedules are, and it's providing windows for 3- and 4-loss teams to get over 2-loss teams, which shouldn't be the case, at least on paper. But when you look at what they've had to go through, the wins, the losses, the record, the strength of the schedule, all that stuff, it's clear that the win-loss record is not a good representation of who's the better team. And I think we've seen that time and time again this year with how the rankings have gone and how wins and losses have gone. I don't think there's a dominant team in college football this year. I think if you had to pick right now, you'd obviously have to say Oregon because they're the only undefeated team, but they haven't wowed me this season in terms of a generational champion or anything along those lines. I think the field's wide open, and I think any of the teams that sneak in could have a chance to win it, and I think that's why there's so much conversation from these fan bases about that 11 and 12 spot. It's because they firmly believe, South Carolina fans firmly believe, if they sneak in, maybe you can rip off a couple wins and win a national championship. Ole Miss fans believe that they can win this thing, and that is a cool thing about this format, but the fact that you're giving 3-loss teams that just aren't good enough, national championship chances, and eventually, I don't know about this year, but eventually, one of those teams is going to win one. And that's been my gripe with this format ever since the start.
Yeah, and I hear people say all the time when it comes to scheduling, and Cincinnati said this not too long. Well, you can't help you. These schedules are done years in advance. You can't help who you play. You can, actually. Yeah. You can't help who you play. Actually, the funny thing, you can. You make the schedule. The other thing, too, like, in the SEC and the Big Ten and at least conferences that want to complain, what I love the most about basketball is like the Big Ten SEC, the Big Ten SEC challenge that used to be the Big Ten ACC challenge. Like, I love all that stuff. I wish these conferences, I know they don't agree or unite on anything, but like unite on this. Come up with some kind of format where it's a Big Ten SEC battle every year in the non-con where everyone pairs up with the team from the opposite or the conference. Like that helps. Even if you're playing a bad Big Ten team, that's still more respectable than the Mercers or whoever else you're playing. Like, that stuff matters. That stuff helps. If Alabama plays Iowa, that's more respectable than playing who the hell is that state. Like, I just think at the end of the day, that stuff matters more than anything else. And it is what it is. So,
I have a clip I just pulled in from Shane Beamer talking about this exact same thing, about how South Carolina at 3 losses is ranked below Miami, and talking about what that means to him and what that could mean for the future of college football.
I might take a couple days, but when you kind of look at all the vagueness of what the committee decides and how they can have one priority one year, not one the next, does that influence you in any way going forward? Do you talk with whoever the next AD is about changes?
If you're asking, is there anything to gain by playing in some of these games that you play out of conference? I think it's something that not just us, but every team needs to look at, because clearly you can go through an entire season, not beat a ranked team, and be in the playoff if you just win. So I think it's something. I'm a competitor. I love playing in those games. I'm looking forward to playing Virginia Tech and Atlanta next season, but the committee made it very clear that they really don't give a hoot who you beat. Just, don't lose 3 times and you're in, even if it means you never beat a ranked opponent.
Not one. Not beat one ranked opponent. He's talking about SMU. He's talking about Miami. These ACC schedules are a joke compared to the SEC and all the other schools in the country. And that's why, in my opinion, and I think more or less a shared opinion now as the rankings have gone on since Tuesday, if Clemson beats SMU, SMU is going to be out. They're going to be below Alabama, and they're going to be out of the playoff. And people are going to be pissed. But it's the right move. SMU has the worst strength of schedule in the entire Power 4. They have not played anyone. They're 75th. Their only ranked game, they lost. They lost to a BYU team. They had a chance to pick up a ranked win, and they didn't do it. They now have a chance, thanks to an easy schedule, to win a game they shouldn't be in to go to the playoff. Seize your opportunity or go home. I have no problem with keeping SMU out if they lose this game. I think it's warranted. And there's questions in the chat. What if they lose by a last-second field goal versus a blowout? I don't care. If SMU does not win the ACC, they should not be in the playoff. Because I don't think Clemson's a playoff team. You have 2 teams in the ACC championship that I don't think are national championship contenders. So you want me to give you credit for losing in a close game to a 20th ranked team that's ranked 17th to justify putting them in the playoffs if they win the game? I'm not going to do it. I think SMU out with a loss is something that's going to make SMU out with a loss is something that's going to make people really mad, but I fully expect it to happen on Sunday.
Yeah, and keep in mind too, by the way, if they lose by a field goal or a close game, that doesn't change the fact that you have no good wins.
Right. That
the best part about your resume is a close loss in a conference championship. I mean, okay, kudos. You played your opponent close in the conference championship game. You lose a heartbreaker and it knocks you out of the playoff with only 1 loss. But again, if we are telling teams that playing a harder schedule increases the likelihood of you missing the playoffs, and we're going to incentivize you to play lighter schedules, because that's what this would be. If you put us, and at the end of the day, to simplify this, the message the college football play, because it's all about messaging, the college football playoff, the message they would send to the entire college football landscape is the incentive to scheduling light is that you're almost guaranteed a spot in the college football playoff. Ohio State has non-conference schedules and series coming up. They have home and homes with Texas that start next year. I think that's at the shoe, if I'm not. Yeah, it's at Texas. So Ohio State at Texas next year, then Texas at Ohio State the following year, Alabama at Ohio State.
Flip it.
Or flip
Texas
it.
in the shoe week 1 next year.
Yep, at noon. So, like, if I'm Ohio State, if that happens, if if SMU makes it in by losing by 3 or a touchdown or at all in the conference championship, if I'm Ohio State, and I'm not really advocating for this, but theoretically, based on what the committee's telling you, take Texas off that damn schedule. Cancel your Alabama schedule. Don't play Notre Dame coming up. They got to, and everyone that makes fun of Ohio State, they have home and homes with Texas, Alabama, Notre Dame, and Georgia coming up. Yeah. So they challenge themselves. Trust me. They are willing to go on the road and welcome good teams in. But at the same time, that used to be what you had to do, because in a 14 playoff, if you're battling other 1 or 2 loss teams, how do you stand out versus those? Oh yeah, we went to Texas. Yeah. We went to Alabama. We went to Georgia. What'd you do? Well, we played Tulane. No. So to me, I think it's important that the committee sets a standard and sets a precedent that, who you play matters. Strength of schedule matters. And I think that's common sense. I think strength of schedule, is that the most important metric to you outside of wins, obviously? But what's the most important metric when it comes to evaluating resumes?
You can't have the number one strength of schedule and be 8-4 and be ranked ahead of a 10-2 team. There is a range to where wins and losses do absolutely matter over everything else. You can't put a 6-6 team over a 10-11-1 team just because they played a harder schedule. That's not what I'm arguing for. What I'm arguing for is when you have a 10-2 team not playing in a conference championship and a 9-3 team not playing in a conference championship, you have to look at more than wins and losses because they didn't play the same 12 games. I think it's the most important tiebreaker to me. If you're having conversations about, who's in over the other, I think the most important tiebreaker is strength of schedule. Other people point to common opponent, which I think is a completely out there argument, at least in my opinion, because every week you're on, you're off. That's not a fair representation of what you are as a team, I think. If you look at I beat this team by 30 and they beat this team by 3, we're clearly better. If you did that, Indiana was going to beat Ohio State in the shoe by 50 3 weeks ago. So I don't think that's a good way to look at it either, because that's the Ole Miss fan argument, is we beat everyone by more than Alabama. Alabama has the 17th strength of schedule. Ole Miss has the 30th. They have similar losses. No brainer. Alabama's in my opinion. I think the one argument that is fair to be had over Alabama is maybe South Carolina, because if you do eliminate head-to-head, which is what would have to happen in order for South Carolina to jump Ole Miss and Alabama, who they lost to both, then they are playing the best football right now. I don't know, but there's people in the chat saying SMU not getting in because they're not a contender is not a good take, because there's other teams getting in, Indiana, Arizona State, that are also not contenders. You're making my point that there's too many teams in the playoff. You're making my point for me. There's not 12 teams in the country that deserve a shot at a national championship. Get it down to 8, and then we can be debating SMU versus Tennessee, which is a much more warranted debate.
Real quick, they're making the wrong argument with that, because it's not about contenders. It's not. What the people in the chat that said if it's about that, then Indiana shouldn't be. What the argument should be is the conference championships. Because SMU will miss the playoff because they lose in a conference championship. SMU will play one more game than Indiana. SMU and Indiana are the same. SM and Indiana is safe. And by the way, if Penn State would have lost to Minnesota this past Saturday, it would be Oregon and Indiana in the college football playoff championship, in the Big Ten championship.
Yeah.
If Penn State would have got upset by Minnesota this past Saturday, Indiana would be playing Oregon in the Big Ten championship. Oregon would then beat Indiana, and Indiana would be out of the playoff.
Yeah.
So the best thing that happened to Indiana was losing to Ohio State, because now they're secured in the playoff. They don't have to risk anything. SMU, they screwed up by trying to win their conference. The real argument should be that, not the other way around, in my opinion. So I do hate that teams are being punished for playing an extra game or risking punishment for playing an extra game.
And I think that is a conversation that is deserved to be had. But if you are going to point to anything else as to why SMU should be above Alabama other than punishment for an extra game, I really can't side with you. I don't understand the arguments. And now I see people in the chat saying, why play the season? Why play the games for conversations like this? So you know who plays a tough schedule and who gets the best wins and who gets the worst losses. I mean, we're not putting a 9-3 Alabama over an 11-0, 12-0 team. We're putting them over a team that played the worst conference in the Power Four in this situation. So let's not act like it's some crazy nonsense to do this. It makes sense. The argument has legs.
And also, that year Cincinnati made it, Jake, the one reason I'm so mad at Ohio State for losing to Michigan, because that year they lost to Oregon. They lost to Michigan, which bailed out the committee. I so bad wanted to see the committee put Ohio State in over an undefeated conference champion Cincinnati, because everyone would have got on their high horse and said how wrong that was, and I would have been like, I know you don't like that, but that was the right decision. Cincinnati, everyone's like, well, they rewarded the Bearcats for an undefeated conference championship season. No, who else were you going to put in?
Yeah, right.
A 2-loss Ohio State team that didn't win a Big Ten championship. No, they made it easy on the committee. And that's the thing here. By the way, Alabama in over SMU. I don't know why it's being debated. Some of these SEC teams, people say, well, then why even play the season? That's being dramatic. You're going to throw away your whole interest in college football over SMU, who had one of the worst strength of schedules, who would be absolutely nobody of significance. And if we're having this debate, that means they would have, the second good team they played this year, that means they would have lost to them. They've proven they can't beat good teams to begin with. So that's kind of where I'm at with that too. People are the fake outrage. You're choosing to be mad because we're giving you the reasons why it makes sense. Strength of schedule, 2 top 10 wins for Alabama. How you don't comprehend that trumps a better record versus no opponents. That would be like saying, hey, this JV team was more impressive than the varsity team. Yeah. We're going to put the JV team in the playoff. Well, hold on. The varsity team had to play varsity teams. Well, it doesn't matter. Their record's better. You see how silly that sounds? That's what this is coming down to at the end of the day.
No, you're absolutely right.
Remember when I said when that music hits to wrap up? And then
you were the one talking.
No, me. That's why I said that. Okay. Like, I'm telling that to you. Like, there are no rules. This is the most Friday show ever. I mean, I was like, man, we're gonna have to fill a lot of time with no Casey, no Elliott, but we talked a lot. 2 days worth of content. Yeah. No show Monday. We'll just the stuff, the overflow of the show today. But everyone, appreciate you guys. Thank you for hanging out. And we'll do this again on Monday. Elliott will be back. Casey will be back. We'll talk about the Cowboys and the Bengals Monday Night Football game. We'll know the playoff field on Monday, so that'll be exciting. So we got a lot to touch on next week. So have a good weekend, everybody. Jacob, appreciate you. We'll talk next week. Of course.
I'm going to bring you all a box lunch momentarily, so stick around. I'll get that stream up and rolling.